Well, developments in the Middle East, of course, are on the minds of those attending the NATO summit in the Netherlands that gets underway today. Leaders there are set to approve a major shift in policy, backing a new defense spending target of 5% of GDP. That's been driven by pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump, and it reflects deepening fears over Russia and its war in Ukraine. Our Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra from Nahmen, is in The Hague attending that summit. Alexandra, how is this summit shaping up from your perspective? Is NATO likely to come out of it looking stronger, or has the friction with the Trump administration irreparably damaged alliance unity?
Well, that's definitely the goal here for the NATO alliance, to look strong and united at this summit. And that is why this gathering is expected to be short and crisp and to focus on one issue: a massive increase in defense spending. This way, European allies want to give Donald Trump a win, because he has been urging them to ramp up their defense spending for quite a while. They want him to be happy. They don't want him to be bored. They want him not to try to blow up everything. So they want to show unity at this very short and brief summit. But of course, this minimalist nature of this gathering will have impact on how the NATO alliance is handling Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has just arrived at the venue behind me, but he is going to meet NATO allies. He is invited to the royal dinner tonight, but he will not participate in the closed-door meeting of the NATO leaders tomorrow. And this is quite a stark contrast to what we saw last year in Washington or the year before in Vilnius.
Now, Spain, I understand, is the only member of NATO that's refused to go along with the new 5% defense spending target. How difficult has it been for the other member states, Alexandra, to accept the increase? Many of them have only now started to hit the previous target of 2%.
Yeah, you're totally right, Terry. It is a very ambitious goal to spend 5% of GDP on defense. And it's been very difficult for countries such as Italy, Belgium or Portugal to sign off on the new defense spending target. But it's the credit for all of that, the fact that all allies, even Spain, is in the end expect to say yes to the new defense target. The credit for that goes to Mark Rutte, who had this very interesting and some would say smart idea to cut the cake into two pieces. So he urged the allies to commit to spending to 3.5% of GDP on core defense spending, new equipment, new weapons, ammunition, air defense systems, and then he wants them to commit to 1.5% on security-related investments, including building new bridges and new roads and fighting hybrid attacks and so on.
Money, of course, is great, but it's not everything. It's got to be spent properly and assets put together with it. How quickly, Alexandra, can NATO turn all that additional spending into increased capabilities? That won't happen overnight.
No, it won't happen overnight. That is totally right. It will take time. And of course, the reason for that is that Europe has not been spending enough on defense in the past. So they need to ramp it up. There are talks with the industry. There is a big meeting here. We expect new pledges and new investments. And the European Union is ready to help. They promise they are ready to borrow money at the international markets to help European allies in NATO to make sure that they have enough money to produce or buy new weapons. It's not only about European companies. We're also talking about companies from Canada, South Korea, and of course, in the end, also from the US. All of that meant to help the Europeans to produce and buy more weapons in the face of what they consider a big threat coming out of Russia.
Alexandra, thank you very much. That was our Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra van Nahmen, in The Hague.
And for more, I'm pleased to welcome Ian Lesser. He's a distinguished fellow and advisor to the president of the German Marshall Fund. He joins us today from Brussels. Welcome to DW. Now, we heard it there, a summit pretty much tailored to appease Donald Trump. Is it going to work?
I think it is likely to work. I mean, in the terms that the Secretary General laid it out, I think the administration is likely to see this as a political victory. Yes, with Spain, it's not quite what they might have wanted, but I don't think they're really looking at it in that country by country fashion, except perhaps for key players like Germany. I think overall the numbers are likely to impress them, even if there are a lot of big question marks about the future, deadlines, etc. I think the Trump administration will claim it as a victory.
But these spending pledges, and I think you're implying that when you say there's a lot of question marks looking at the future, they're non-binding. And many NATO members have just now started to hit the previous contribution target of 2%. So who is to say that we will really see 5% of GDP by 2035 from all members, besides Spain, of course?
It's very unclear. The timing is unclear. What you count is somewhat unclear. I mean, there are these two categories of sort of traditional defense investments on the one hand, and a lot of sort of other things which actually are quite meaningful, infrastructure and so on the other. That actually makes it easier to sell politically in many countries because, in a sense, those are dual-use investments. It could be on roads to support tanks, for example, and things like that. But, there are huge question marks. But I think, no one is in the mood at the moment to start unpacking this in such detail. The broad gauge nature of the commitment, which is substantial, really will matter. Now, as you heard earlier, it really does matter whether Europe can really get to those numbers and indeed whether the defense industries in Europe are capable of supporting that. So there are some very big open questions.
Open questions, but you say that the U.S. is going to go ahead and perceive this as a victory. Still, how big do you consider the risk of American disengagement to be at this moment?
I think the risks of American disengagement, they're clearly somewhat higher with the Trump administration than they were in the past. But I think the key driver there is not so much American disenchantment with Europe as it is simply other priorities, other demands in other spaces, above all in Asia. And, that was a standing risk for Europe. I think many people perhaps had put that off as something that was long term, but it's not. I mean, in some ways, the Trump administration has given history a shove and has forced Europe to focus on this. There is a risk. I think we'll get a good sense probably out of the summit of the atmospherics about the American overall commitment to Europe, which I think in many ways matter as much as the defense investment side of things. Yeah,
these defense investments, this 5% goal, these are all long-term investments, but especially the European members of NATO are faced with a very current threat and a very real threat they perceive to be Russia, currently, of course, engaged in a war with Ukraine. So how concerned do you think they should be about the unpredictability of the man in the White House?
Well, they will be concerned, and they should be concerned. I mean, it really does matter whether the United States is fully committed to European defense and what form that defense takes in the future, whether we're talking about nuclear strategy or we're talking about the presence of American troops in Europe or the aero-naval presence in the Mediterranean and the South. I mean, all of these things actually matter in Europe, depending upon where you are, of course. Geography also matters. If you're in Poland or the Baltic states, the world looks very different than it may look around the Mediterranean. It's not that anyone is giving short shrift to these security concerns at the moment, but they have a slightly different texture in different places. This will be a very important moment to gauge, what the president says and how credible the American commitment to Europe will be in the future.
There's Ian Lesser of the German Marshall Fund. Pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks for your time.
Good to be with you.
Well, Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has just addressed the German parliament ahead of his first NATO leaders summit as Chancellor. During his speech, he also renewed his calls for a lasting ceasefire in the Middle East.
We welcome the call by the American president for a ceasefire. If this ceasefire succeeds, after the decisive military strikes by the United States and the Israeli army against Iran's nuclear facilities in Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan, then positive development is possible one that could make the Middle East and the world a safer place. We now call on both Iran and Israel to follow the American president's call. We take the liberty of asking what goal Israel seeks to achieve in the Gaza Strip. And we urge that the people in Gaza be treated with dignity, especially women, children and the elderly. And now, today, in these days, the moment has also come to agree on a ceasefire for Gaza.
DW's chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, followed the Chancellor's speech closely for us and joins us now. Michaela, we just heard a little bit of what Friedrich Merz had to say there. What did you make of his statement?
I felt that it was clearly realpolitik in action that we saw there. Friedrich Merz was very fast to adjust his message and his stance to simply a new reality that was created over the weekend with the US getting involved and bombarding those nuclear sites in Iran. That was a new reality. Only on Friday, Friedrich Merz had his own foreign minister sign a call on all sides, including the United States, to refrain from any kind of escalation. So here we are, and this is really rather typical of Friedrich Merz. He wants to stick with his principles. At the same time, he's fast to adjust to a reality that he simply cannot change. But he does want Germany to have influence where it can change the geopolitical shifts that we're currently seeing. And here he highlighted economic strength as one. And of course, at that NATO summit, the decision to have 5% of GDP spent on defense in the future. That will see Germany by 2029 potentially spending some 150 billion euros on its defense budget. In today's terms, that's almost a third of the current overall budget here in Germany. So this really is a new reality, as he put it, and he tries to signal that Germany is willing to play its part. Notably, he didn't refer to international law here, because that, of course, is the big question mark hanging over those actions by the Americans, the Israelis, and Iran, but particularly over Israel's action that it's taking in Gaza and the plight of civilians there, which is deplorable. And that has been stated by the German Chancellor, but clearly avoiding again making some kind of reference to international law, as he has done in the past, where he already spoke of international law breaches taking place in Gaza.
Now, Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor, is heading off to the NATO summit in The Hague today. What priorities, Michaela, did he highlight for Germany ahead of that summit?
Well, clearly a message here in the Bundestag, in the German parliament, always works both ways. It's for international allies, but also for the German public. And the German public, for them, he had the clear message that this is a new reality that Germany has to adjust to, that nobody takes any great joy in spending so much more on defense, but that is something that essentially the bad news he continues to break to the German public. And that has actually seen him get some traction in the opinion polls, so it's not working against him. To international partners, he keeps sending the message that the G7, that's also what he highlighted, are sticking together, that they are on the same page over Ukraine, including the United States. That, of course, is a point that is debatable. And he highlighted that he will try and convince the US president to also have another package of sanctions against Russia over Ukraine. So he is going there to convince America, the American president, to do something that he's not currently planning to do. At least it doesn't look like that package in Congress will sail through. At the same time, he wants to keep the Americans on board. And we see that in the messaging both on Iran, but also and particularly on the willingness to engage in defense spending and on trade with the US in the future.
Michaela, thank you very much. Our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, there at the German Bundestag.